Hey guys, Solomon here. Welcome back to Let's Play Prison Architect. Today we have a long overdue update to this series, and I think it's about time I close it out anyway. So, we're back at Galaxia Penitentiary for one last visit, during which I will cover all the alpha updates that have occurred since my last playthrough. In addition, I will also cover a few things I discovered on my own that I will just impart onto anyone else who may want to play this game for themselves and build their own prison. Now, just as a little warning, I have actually recorded 4 hours of footage for this video, and I'm condensing it down into 23 minutes. So this is post-commentary, and it will be jumping around a lot, so please show some patience. It's going to be a little bit of trial, I imagine. So let's jump right in, go back in time a little bit to the way my prison was not too long ago, and we'll talk about Alpha 15. So in the Alpha before this, Alpha 14, we had guard dogs, which had fatigue, and when they got tired they had to go to the kennel. Well, now that theory applies to all of your staff. For that reason we have the staff room. The staff room contains pretty much everything they will need to relax, drink machines, sofas, and just a few things from the common room I threw in for laughs. So, when your staff are tired, they can come here and they will recover their energy a lot faster. Now, I'm briefly going over the object list here. This wasn't actually added in this update. This was actually put into Alpha 17. But the object list got an overhaul. So, here we have the standard object list where everything is listed. But by clicking in the lower right, I get a more condensed version, which only shows what objects which belong to the rooms in which I'm hovering over, as well as a couple other general items and whatnot, so that's kind of nice. In addition, this update, Alpha 15, includes a mod system. So if there's any particular mods you want to get from the Steam Workshop or anywhere, you can download them, you can access them from this folder, and that's all you really need to know. So that's almost the end of Alpha 15, but there is one last thing I need to mention. In this update, they added an extra acceleration button, so now everything works at 3 times speed. So that's nice. Actually, I really love that. I was asking for that, so apparently they heard me. Alright, so now we're moving into Alpha 16 here, which is kind of a major update, actually, and for that reason, I'm actually creating a completely new wing in my prison. So right now, we're just kind of getting a quick summary of everything I did. I planned out the walls, I laid down the foundation, I bought all the items I needed to fill the new cells, I put down the plumbing, I put down the walls. All in all, I created a completely new branch in my prison for maximum security prisoners. But how am I going to mark this area as a place only for maximum security? Well, starting with Alpha 16, in addition to a bunch of AI updates, they also added segmented layouts. If we go into deployment, we can mark this area as maximum security only. And likewise, I can also mark certain areas for minimum security or standard security. No, normal security. I forget what they call it, but there's 3 levels of prisoners, and you can mark them as any of the 3 or shared to share them between the different levels. So in this case, you could create a segregated prison to keep your most dangerous prisoners away from your least dangerous. And it works with pretty much any room. You can use kitchens, canteens, everything, and it helps to create a divided prison, so that's nice. So, while I show off how my prison is divided into normal and maximum security here, and reassign guards to different parts of the area, I also want to mention some of the AI updates. One of the major AI updates is that prisoners are a little smarter now. For one, they'll actually know when there is nothing in their way to freedom. So let's say I leave all the gates open and everything. They'll immediately know that they can escape, and radiating out from the gate, they will actually try to escape. So those closest to the gate will try to escape, then those who are further away, and so forth. So it is interestingly smarter for that reason. For now, we're going to talk about another one. That is the addition of generation options for your prisons. So you can create them with leftover buildings from previous structures. You can have them have forests. You can include lakes that clip into the starting area and the road. That's a little bit of a bug that exists at the moment. I think they'll take care of that eventually, but It's nothing too serious, and it's good for helping you create a more unique prison experience, because you can't build over the lakes. Those are stuck there. You have to build around them. So that's an extra challenge if you want it. And lastly, in this update, we have a new item. It is the road gate. The road gate is a very much needed item, which I actually think I requested at some point. Imagine that. But as you can imagine, placing down a road gate makes it a requirement for vehicles to stop there, and for your guards to let them out. So in other words, it makes part of the road part of your prison. It basically increases the security of the road, it makes it less likely for prisoners to escape, and best of all, it means I can leave the front door open because the gates will still be there. I'll still have my other doors in place and everything, and not a whole lot else to worry about in terms of security. But now my workers can come and go as they please, and I don't have to worry about anyone escaping. As you may have noticed there, however, I placed down something there to prevent them from escaping, and that is an armed guard. Now, before we talk about armed guards, let me just first point out that I did actually make a security room for absolutely no reason whatsoever. But here we have an armory. New to Alpha 17 are armed guards and the armory. So, the way armed guards work, just looking at an alternate scenario I put together here, there's a bit of unrest in the lunchroom there, but if I move my armed guards in here, this will actually create a suppression effect. So the main purpose of armed guards is to create suppression. If your prisoners are particularly rowdy, or if they have a lot of complaints, you can use this as the effect of an immediate suppression, and that will keep them in line, and you don't have to worry as badly about them rioting. But that's not to say they won't still riot. In fact, they will still try to riot, as I will kind of show off later. But on top of that, armed guards are very useful in dealing with riots as well, in addition to the riot police you can get under emergencies, but I'm not really going to talk about them. Instead, I'm going to talk more about armed guards. So, in order to have armed guards, you need to have an armory. In order to get an armory, you have to unlock it in bureaucracy. Just be careful, because during a riot, the armory will be a high-priority target. Your prisoners will go after it to try and get guns to get out easier, and you don't want that, so make sure it's always locked up tight. So right now, I'm showing off another thing right here. This is the forestry room. This was included in Alpha 17, and this is basically just a giant outdoor area you can create where your staff will grow trees and then chop them down. And you can then sell the logs that you get from chopping them down for profit. However, instead of selling the logs for profit, what we could do instead is use them in Alpha 18. The Education Update. So the way this update works is that all prisoners now have the option of going through reform programs. So, for starters, you can basically put them in a classroom like this one, and you can teach them just a general education and even some foundation education if you want. However, another thing that came with this update was the fact that prisoners can no longer just be dropped into the workshops or the kitchen. In order for them to be able to work in those areas, they need to take the particular entry-level courses needed to work there. Workshop safety and kitchen cleanliness and hygiene. So, while this does kind of hamper how quickly you can use prison labor, it does allow you to do a few other things. For instance, if you teach your prisoners carpentry apprenticeship, they can take those logs from earlier and turn them into planks and then turn them into beds. We unfortunately cannot use the beds, but we can at least sell them for a lot of money. In addition, this update introduced tasers and body armor. Tasers give your guards a one-shot knockout against prisoners, which is good for quick takedowns during, well, not during riots, but just during any kind of incident, and body armor adds extra defense. So, this next update, Alpha 19, is the financial system update, where the entire financial system got a huge facelift. For starters, we have a lot more grants now. You can take 2 grants at a time, but you can hold a third one if you put your accountant on it. You can take out a bank loan, but you need to unlock that with bureaucracy first. And what's more, as we can see here, the financial report's been tidied up a bit. One thing you might note is that there is a day without incidents part right there, and you can get up to $10,000 per day if you are incident-free for quite a while, and that's a nice chunk of extra change you can use in your starting prison. So make sure to try to get those days without incident as high as possible so you can get the full 10,000. In addition, we have valuation here, which was in the previous updates, but now, in addition to selling our prison, we can also sell shares of our prison. So what this means is, if you need a little extra money, if you are taking care of loans, or you don't want to loan, or you can't loan, you can sell shares of your prison. What this means is, you can just take whatever your current valuation is, and you will earn 10% of that. So you'll be selling 10% of your prison each time you sell shares, and you will get 10% of your prison value. The problem is, if you sell your prison afterwards, you will get 10% less of the total valuation. So it will determine how much you will get in the end, among other things. So one last thing to note, and we'll jump over to bureaucracy here to show it off, is that there are tax reliefs. Because Prison Architect Incorporated is not a federal organization, and thus you will be taxed. 30% of your total profits. However, if you get those tax reliefs, you don't have to worry about those deductions. You can just work on your way and save your money. So now we're entering Alpha 20, where we are actually entering kind of the endgame stuff. For starters, we have a few extra menus to the prisoners, which tell you what their condition has been, what their activity has been, what their mood has been for the entirety of their stay in, like, percentage bars. And then we have this. This is the grading sheet. This will tell you how well you've been punishing your prisoners, how well you've been reforming them, how well their security has been, and also how good their health has been. The better these scores are, the better you will be graded, both per prisoner and overall. Because this is the reoffending rate. So the better you have those scores, the better your reoffending rate, the lower it is, the better. Because we don't want our prisoners to go back out in the world and commit crimes again. So, one last thing to talk about are failure conditions. These were also introduced in Alpha 20. And what these are, well, they're basically the ways you can get game overs in this game. So, while I show off a riot I staged here, let's talk a little bit about those failure conditions. For one, this is a failure condition right here. If you have a riot and it goes out of control for too long, you will actually lose your prison. The government will come in and they will shoot up everyone. It's not a very fun ending. In fact, it's very tragic. Because even though it's a game over, you still get to watch all of this happen as it happens, and it's not fun at all. The next failure condition is if you get bankruptcy. So, the way bankruptcy works is, if your on-hand cash is under $500, if you have a negative cash flow rate like I have right now, and if you are in debt to the bank by $10,000, you can get a government bailout, which is one of the grants. It will clear your debt, give you back some money, but if this happens a second time, you won't get that bailout, and you will basically get a game over for bankruptcy. Just a note, your prison does have to be a certain size before you get the bailout. It has to be at least 30 prisoners big. Moving on to the next game over thing is if you have too many escapes. If too many prisoners escape your prison in 2 consecutive days, then you will get a game over for that. And the same thing will happen if you have too many deaths in 2 consecutive days. So, like, let's say you have a riot like this, where we've already had a few deaths right now. If I had more deaths than this, and then I had just as many deaths the next day, then I would be arrested for criminal negligence. I'm not kidding. You will actually get arrested and put in your own prison. Which is kind of a cruel twist of irony if you think about it. So, if you were maybe watching earlier, you'll notice one of the silly things is that guards aren't allowed to enter a riot-designated zone. Staff by default will avoid the areas which are full of riots. Which is a good thing, but it all the guards that have all those expensive tasers, and they can't use them. It seems like a waste, almost. But in any case here, I get to show off one of the more extreme cases here. So, this is where armed guards really come in handy, is getting back control of your prison during a riot. Normally, they will fight with their fist when confronting prisoners. But if you turn on free fire, they will open fire at will. They will open fire anyway if they believe that they are in threat of dying, but otherwise they will, well, they'll just open fire if you have free fire on. They will kill prisoners, and as you can see, they will intimidate all the other prisoners into surrendering. So this is one of the things armed guards are good at, is even if they have to kill a few, they can usually intimidate the others into surrendering. And just like that, the riot is over. To be fair, I have a really small prison, so this wasn't a really bad riot. Honestly, I'm surprised only 2 riot guards were able to suppress the whole thing. All the same, though, there were 6 deaths in this whole situation, and a lot of solitary lockdown and everything, and this is the worst case scenario. You do not want a riot to happen, not just because of the failure conditions, but just because you just feel guilty inside to have let something like this happen. So, moving into Alpha 21, this is the narcotics update. So looking at the new screen here for the contraband menu, where we can see what contraband has been confiscated over time, in the last 24 hours, 7 days, and in all time. Some of the new narcotics that have been introduced are heroin and, well, a few other drugs. So, because prisoners have addictions to these items, we have 2 new programs to help with that. We have the methadone program, which will allow them to kill their need for drugs and heroin and all that other stuff. Not completely, mind you, but it will, for the most part, help them fight the cravings. And we have the Alcoholics Anonymous, which will actually allow prisoners to completely kick their alcohol habit. So these 2 programs are very instrumental in helping your prisoners reform for the future, because a non-addicted prisoner is a happy prisoner. And you can actually tell if some prisoners have the need for drugs or alcohol, because it will actually show in the needs menu. But to move on from that for a moment, let's take a look at the regime menu, because in Alpha 21 we had an update to this. As you can see, we have the standard regime here. However, we can set a separate regime for maximum security and minimum security prisoners. So if we want to give the prisoners different yard times per tier, we can do that. If we want to give one tier more lockdown time than another, we can do that as well. As of the most recent update, you can actually remove an advanced regime by clicking on a little X that appears above each column to merge everything back into a single regime. In addition to the advanced regime and the narcotics update, Alpha 21 also gives us a language selector. So what this means is you can now download different languages from the workshop or elsewhere, and you can actually use them as translations in your game. So right here I'm using the Prison Architect language kit, and as you can see, everything is kind of silly. So that's pretty much it for Alpha 21. The only alpha left to mention is Alpha 22, which was a giant bug bash the developers did where they got rid of 73 of the most notorious bugs that were reported to them. Because I was so lucky, I was able to capture one of these bugs on camera before the update. Nothing really to talk about here. Guards and staff will get stuck on corners sometimes, but that's been removed, so there's no real need to mention it now. So that is pretty much it for all the alpha updates. However, there are a few other things I still want to cover. For one, how do you deal with the power situation? As you can see, my prison is starting to get a little too big for the current generator to handle. So, let's just do what we always do. Let's add more capacitors. Unfortunately, that does not raise the limit. There is a very strict overhead. You can only attach 16 capacitors to a single generator. And as you can kind of see here, when I thought of putting in a new generator, it doesn't work. So this is something the game doesn't really tell you about, and you have to kind of figure out on your own. Or look it up like I did, because after this I just kind of gave up. The trick is, you can't have 2 generators on the same network. You have to have them on 2 separate grids. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually splitting up my grid into 2 halves, and putting a generator on each one. So this is how you divide up the power in your prison. This is how you handle much larger prisons, which have a very high energy demand. You basically need to split the grid. Another thing to mention in passing, make sure you put your prisoners in lockdown. Because while I've been really nice to my prisoners and also giving them a lot of free time, the game actually rates you poorly for that, because too much free time doesn't seem very good. It makes you look soft on criminals. So, instead of making this a luxury resort, you need to remind them that they're here for a reason, and put them in lockdown every once in a while. And ideally, you'll want to put your maximum security prisoners in longer lockdown than your normal security, so make sure to tier it appropriately. One other thing that I feel that I should mention is, you know how I have armed guards running around my prison? Well, you probably don't, but let me just put it like this. It's a bad idea. Because while suppression does keep your prisoners in line, as it turns out, suppression also has a negative effect on their ability to go through the reform programs. So, if you have a too heavily suppressed prison, your prisoners aren't going to learn anything. They're going to suffer, and more often than not, they are going to fail the harder courses. So if you really want your prisoners to want to take the reform programs, to want to pass, to maintain an eager attitude the whole time, then you need to make sure your armed guards only come out when they're needed. So that about does it for Let's Play Prison Architect. This is probably the last we'll see of Galaxia Penitentiary. I might come back for a second season, but if I'm going to do that, then I want to do so with a challenge. I'm open to ideas for prison builds that I could be challenged to do. If you guys would like me to try a particular kind of prison, if you would like to see me try it on a particular map or anything else, let me know. Leave a comment or otherwise message me. Otherwise, that's it. This is Solomon signing off, and I'll see you guys next time.